the recommendation of the children that the children had put forward in the final decision. So when you open the space, often member states are sensitive to children's voices, and they actually glad to hear the challenges from the children directly instead of us, the INGOs. So for us, it's not optional, it's a commitment, and we also realize that the children often do not really need the training that we often offer. We explaining just the processes is often sufficient for them to engage and be efficient in their advocacy to influence policy outcomes. On tradition and rights, this is a difficult one because, and this is not David Children talking, this is Doris Nkumu talking as an African. It's always a tension. Promoting rights, and often, sometimes when you promote the rights, there is a clash with your culture. And here, of course, we talked about corporal punishment, and thank you, Sam, for reminding all of us that the violence actually starts at home, and it's perpetrated in different places, including the school, or FGM, or child marriage. The challenge is that there are good practices, and I'm sorry to say that, and I think we should not be ashamed to say that in our culture, just like in any other culture around the world, we have good practices and bad practices. Practices that have an impact on a child's health or ability to learn are practices that we need to abandon, regardless. So but we also need to talk about the good practices and especially cultural practices that we have and promote that. The challenge is that the narrative and the emphasis is often on the bad practices, of course because we need to combat them, but we also do have excellent cultural practices that we need to emulate. So that would be my answer. It's not an either or, but we need to see what is good for the development and welfare of the child and decide from there. Thank you.
Thank you. I think she said most of the things correctly, and I want to keep expanding. But very good questions from our colleagues, the children. Just to add quickly, I really agree that culture itself is not bad, but I think the issue is just identifying what aspects of that culture are not helpful for the children. As we watched in the video, people can still argue in some context that it's our culture tomorrow, people are connected. But is that helpful? Are we seeing the effects of the children, of their health, of their education, of their future? So at that moment, then that cultural aspect has to be dropped. But there are other good aspects of culture that we build as African, as a national, different countries, and that should be maintained. Talking about political spaces, I think it's a broad topic as well. I talked about it briefly during my statement, and I gave an example of the Children's Parliament. This is a structure that helps children engage with different levels of leadership in a very assertive way. And I can give examples of Lesotho and other countries as well. But the risk there is being driven by actors outside government. So, for example, World Vision is doing it, UNICEF, and then government is collaborating very actively. What it means is that if these two partners are not there, then that's not sustained. So it only sustained by maybe it has to be there to ensure that children are consulted officially by the government that they are making their decisions. Some governments have done it, so it can be done. So it remains an advocacy issue for us, and we think that it will increase that voice of the children officially in the country. There were a few other good questions our friends asked about how does poverty drive harmful practices. I think that's a very broad question again, and I know other speakers will speak to that as well, but we know that desperate people make desperate decisions, and desperate children will make desperate decisions. A child is abandoned, they are not looked after. We've seen at times a young girl by the street begging for money for school, and you don't know. There are different people on the street. You won't find an evil person who's going to take advantage of that begging young girl who is genuinely looking for help, and I want to use them. So poverty just drives people to make very, very desperate decisions, and that's why even as NGOs, even as ourselves, what we do in the communities, we really focus on empowering families so that they are able to look after their children. We measure our success in communities through the child well-being outcome, meaning that if families are empowered, they are able to raise their resources, they are able to raise their income, grow their own food, they are able to look after their children, and children will not be able to be finding themselves on the streets, exposing themselves to harm. And we are also reminding that educating families, educating parents, reminding them on the basis of protecting their own children. I don't want to finish all the questions. I know we have many colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think, and again, the questions are thought-provoking in the sense that these questions go very far in terms of how we treat children. And I mean, children are not a byproduct, or they're not byproduct of our decisions. They are supposed to be an integral part of our decisions. I think that was part of answering the question on what role to the company. I think we first need to identify the evolving capacity of children. We need to identify what children we're talking about, because sometimes you also want to set up children to fail. And so you want to ensure that whatever role you are sending them are roles that they can effectively be able to accomplish. But regardless, children have to be informed depending on what decisions they are taking and their capacity. They have to be part of the decisions and give their input. They have to be told what the implications of the decisions are. And that is at the point of making those decisions. That they have to be involved in implementation. I think this was a class question which I'm looking at those who are going to answer over there. So I want it to be tried on one. But children have to be part of the implementation, because when they do understand the challenges that we face in terms of the decisions. And sometimes you don't have to tell them what the implications are, and they let them do the process. So I think it's important that we involve them in the implementation and also the review. So the whole cycle of decision making, implementation, review, and going back into the cycle. But I think it's also important to create safe spaces for children, because sometimes you don't want them to be in spaces where they're adults and they're speaking all the legal languages which they don't understand. And so part of what we do is create spaces for children, and their own safe spaces. We guarantee that the space is space, they can say whatever they want to say, and guarantee and assure them that whatever they say is not going to be used against them. We're having a conversation this afternoon during lunch, and we're saying, those days when we're growing, I mean, when your parents are having a conversation, you are only supposed to think, you are not supposed to hear. And even if you say something, you say they run away, because you know they catch you. But times have changed, and so I think it's important to involve children in that way. Will children be heard? Yes, children will be heard. We've seen the committee adopt measures that were input from children.